I'm going to start this by ripping the Band-Aid off because I don't have the energy for suspense right now. 3 weeks ago, I laid on an operating table and let a surgeon cut me open to give my boyfriend Mark my left kidney. I saved his life. 5 days later, while I was waddling down the hospital hallway, dragging my IV pole, fighting through the worst pain I've ever felt, I walked in on him sleeping with his post-op nurse. He has my organ inside his body. He is literally filtering his blood through a piece of me while he betrays me. But Mark forgot one tiny detail. We aren't married. He is on my corporate health insurance as a domestic partner, and that policy has a very specific clause about termination of relationship. He thinks he got a free kidney. He's about to find out he actually purchased a luxury item he can't afford. Here is how everything went to hell. Mark and I had been together for 5 years. We were that couple, the ones everyone said were goals. We finished each other's sentences, we never fought about the big stuff, and we were planning a wedding for next fall. But last year, Mark got sick. It wasn't a slow decline, it was a cliff. He was diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. His kidneys were functioning at 8%, and he was dying in front of my eyes. If you've never watched someone you love go through dialysis, pray you never have to. It turned my vibrant, athletic boyfriend into a gray, shivering ghost. The dialysis port, the constant exhaustion, the smell of the clinic, it consumed our lives. The doctor said the wait list for a deceased donor was 5 to 7 years. Mark didn't have 5 years, so I got tested. I remember the day the coordinator called me. I was a match. Not just a match, but a near-perfect match. It felt like destiny. My parents were hesitant. They were terrified of the surgery, but I didn't blink. How could I? I looked at Mark, wasting away on the couch, and I knew I would tear my heart out if it meant he could live, let alone a kidney. "Are you sure, babe?" he asked me the night before the surgery, tears in his eyes. He held my hand so tight. "You're saving my life. I will spend every single day making it up to you. I promise." I believed him. I believed him so much that I signed the consent forms, took the leave of absence from my high-stress job as an HR director, and walked into that operating room with a smile. The surgery was brutal. People tell you the recipient recovers faster than the donor, but you don't understand it until you feel it. When I woke up, I felt like I had been hit by a semi-truck. Every breath was a sharp stab. My abdomen felt like it had been hollowed out with a rusted spoon. I was on a morphine drip and still crying from the agony. Mark, on the other hand, woke up looking like he'd drunk from the fountain of youth. The color was back in his cheeks instantly. His creatinine levels dropped to normal within 24 hours. My kidney was working perfectly. We were placed in rooms on the same floor of the transplant ward, just 3 doors apart. This is where Nurse Jessica comes in. Jessica was the night shift nurse assigned to our wing. She was young, bubbly, and honestly stunning. At first, I was grateful for her. She seemed attentive. But by day 3 of recovery, through the haze of my painkillers, I started noticing things. When I rang my call button because my pain was at a 9 out of 10, Jessica would take 20 minutes to arrive, sighing as she adjusted my drip. "You need to try to tolerate the discomfort, honey," she'd say, her voice dripping with condescension. "We can't keep upping the dose." But when Mark's light went on, she was there in seconds. I dragged myself out of bed to shuffle to Mark's room. The doctor said walking was crucial for recovery, and I'd find her sitting on the edge of his bed, not checking his vitals, just sitting, laughing. She'd be fluffing his pillows, touching his arm, leaning in way too close to check his incision site. "He's doing so well," she would chirp when I walked in, quickly standing up. "His recovery is miraculous. You, on the other hand, look exhausted. Go back to bed." I brushed it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, jealous, and hormonal from the surgery trauma. Mark was just happy to be alive. He was high on life and steroids. Of course he was charming. That's who Mark is. The incident happened on the 5th night. It was 3 a.m. They had taken me off the heavy morphine and switched me to oral painkillers, which weren't working. I couldn't sleep. My back was spasming, and I needed to walk the halls to get the gas moving in my system. I put on my robe, grabbed my IV pole, and started the slow, agonizing shuffle down the dim corridor. The hospital was silent. just the hum of machines and the squeak of my rubber socks on the linoleum. I approached Mark's room. The door was cracked open about 6 inches. I intended to just peek in to see if he was sleeping, maybe hold his hand for a minute to ground myself. As I got closer, I heard a sound. It was a stifled giggle, then a low moan. I froze. My brain refused to process it. He's in pain, I thought. He's moaning from pain. I pushed the door open another few inches. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of the monitors and the streetlights outside the window. The privacy curtain was drawn halfway around the bed, but because of the angle of the door, I could see into the gap. Jessica wasn't checking his vitals. She was straddling him. I stood there, paralyzed. I watched my boyfriend, the man who had my kidney, an organ that had been inside my body less than a week ago, reach up and grab her hips. I watched the nurse, who had told me 2 hours ago that she was too busy to bring me an ice pack, grind down on him. "Careful with the stitches," I heard Mark whisper. It was the same tender voice he used to use with me. "I'm the nurse," she giggled, leaning down to kiss his neck. "I know exactly what you can handle." The physical sensation that hit me wasn't heartbreak. It was shock. Cold, vibrating shock. I felt like my incision had ripped open and my guts were spilling onto the floor. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run in there and rip the IVs out of his arm. I wanted to demand my kidney back. But I didn't. Instead, a wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to clamp my hand over my mouth. I stumbled backward, the wheels of my IV pole screeching slightly. Inside the room, the movement stopped. "Did you hear that?" Mark whispered. "Probably just the janitor," Jessica dismissed him. I turned and limped back to my room as fast as my broken body would let me. I made it to my bathroom just in time to vomit bile into the toilet. I sat on the cold tile floor, hugging my incision pillow, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I sat there for an hour, staring at the wall. I replayed the last 5 years, the sacrifices, the dialysis appointments, the surgery, the scar that would mar my body forever. He didn't just cheat on me. He waited until he had secured the goods, my literal flesh and blood, and then discarded me the moment he felt strong enough to get it up. As the sun started to rise, the shock faded, and something else took over, a cold, calculating rage. I dragged myself off the floor and reached for my purse. I pulled out my phone. I didn't text him. I didn't call my mom. I opened my work email. I work in HR. Specifically, I manage benefits for a Fortune 500 tech company. Our insurance plan is the Cadillac of plans. It covers 100% of transplant surgeries, which can cost upwards of $300,000 to $500,000. Mark is a freelancer. He has no insurance. He is covered solely as my domestic partner. I pulled up the policy document. I scrolled to section 4.2, eligibility and termination of domestic partnership. There it was, the clause I had written myself 3 years ago when we switched providers. Coverage for a domestic partnership is contingent upon a signed affidavit of exclusivity and shared financial responsibility. In the event of the termination of the partnership, coverage ceases immediately. If the partnership is found to be dissolved or the affidavit violated, e.g. via infidelity or separation, prior to the date of a claim, the insurer reserves the right to seek retroactive reimbursement for all claims paid during the period of ineligibility. I looked at the date on my phone. The surgery was billed 5 days ago, but the hospital billing cycle doesn't close until discharge. If I broke up with him today, and if I could prove that our relationship was effectively over due to his violation of the exclusivity affidavit, I could technically argue that he was not a covered dependent at the time the final bill was generated. I wiped the vomit from my lip. I wasn't going to confront them yet. I needed evidence. I needed to document the affair so clearly that when the insurance company did their investigation, they would see that the domestic partnership was a fraud. I stood up, brushed my hair, and pressed the call button. When the day shift nurse came in, thankfully not Jessica, I asked for some water. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" she asked. "I'm feeling much better," I lied, my voice steady. "In fact, I think I'm strong enough to go sit with Mark for a while. I want to spend as much time with him as possible before we go home." The game was on. He had my kidney, but I held the receipt. The next 3 days were the longest, most excruciating days of my life. You know that saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer? It takes on a whole new meaning when your enemy has your internal organ and you have to pretend to fluff his pillows while your own stitches are pulling apart. I decided not to confront them immediately. Screaming in the hospital would have gotten security called on me. It would have been messy, emotional, and ultimately ineffective. I didn't want a scene. I wanted total destruction. And for that, I needed undeniable proof. So I played the role of the doting, recovering girlfriend. Every morning, I forced myself to walk to Mark's room. It was psychological torture. I had to watch Nurse Jessica fawn over him. I had to watch her check his catheter with a lingering touch that was definitely not in the medical handbook. I had to watch Mark smile at her, that specific, crinkly-eyed smile he used to save for me. But the worst part was how they treated me.
"Babe, could you get me some ice chips?" Mark asked on day 6. "Jessica's busy with other patients, and my throat is parched." I was sitting in the chair next to his bed, clutching my abdomen because my pain meds were wearing off. "Mark, walking hurts. Can't you ring the call button for the aide?" He rolled his eyes. "God, you're really milking this, aren't you? The doctor said you need to walk. I'm the one with the new organ, remember? My body is under attack. I need support, not complaints." I saw Jessica in the doorway, smirking. "He's right, honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake syrup. "Recovery is a mindset. You need to be more positive for him." I gritted my teeth so hard I thought they'd crack. "Sure," I said. "I'll get the ice." I used that servant dynamic to my advantage. Because they saw me as a doormat, they stopped being careful. On the 7th night, the night before our discharge, I put my plan into action. I told Mark I was going to sleep in the chair in his room because I didn't want him to be lonely. I popped a sleeping pill, actually just a Tylenol, and put on an eye mask. Then I turned on the voice recorder app on my phone, slid it under the pillow of the spare chair, and slumped over, pretending to be out cold. It didn't take long. Around 11 p.m., Jessica came in for her rounds. "Is she asleep?" Jessica whispered.
"Yeah, she took a pill. She's out," Mark replied. His voice changed instantly from the whiny patient to a smooth operator. I lay there, breathing rhythmically, while the recorder captured everything. "I'm going to miss this," Mark said. "The extra attention." "You have my number," Jessica giggled. "Besides, you'll be back for checkups. And I get off shift at 7 a.m. Maybe I can swing by your place next week, when she's back at work." "She won't be back at work for weeks," Mark scoffed. "She's taking the full medical leave. It's annoying. I was hoping to have the place to myself so you could come over." "Does she suspect anything?" "No way," Mark laughed. It was a cruel, hollow sound. "She's too busy feeling sorry for herself about the scar. Besides, she's obsessed with me. She literally gave me a kidney. She's not going anywhere." "You're bad," Jessica purred. "I'm alive," he corrected, "and I plan on enjoying it. Honestly, I should have left her months ago, but, the kidney." "You stayed for the kidney?"
I mean, I couldn't exactly break up with my donor, could I? That would have been suicide. But now, well, I have what I need. My heart stopped. I felt a cold sweat break out over my body. It wasn't just cheating. It was a long con. He had used me for parts. He had looked me in the eye, said I love you, and planned a future, all while watching the clock until he secured the harvest. I also caught something else on the recording, something legally distinct. "Here," Jessica whispered. "I brought you something extra, not on the chart." "The good stuff?" "Oxy, 20 milligrams. The doctor lowered your dose today, but I know you like the buzz. Just don't tell the day shift, okay? I didn't log it." "You're the best, Jess." Bingo. Not only did I have proof of the affair, violating the insurance affidavit, but I also had proof of her diverting narcotics and failing to chart medication. That was a career-ending move for a nurse. The next morning, discharge day, was chaotic. I managed to sneak away to the hospital cafeteria to make a phone call. I called a lawyer a friend had recommended, a sharp named Mr. Henderson, who specialized in contract law and insurance fraud. I explained the situation, the domestic partner affidavit, the exclusivity clause, the cheating, and the timing. "Listen to me carefully," Henderson said, his voice sharp. "The hospital hasn't sent the final coded bill to your insurance provider yet. That usually happens 7 to 10 days post-discharge.
If you formally notify your HR department and the insurance carrier that the domestic partnership is dissolved retroactive to the date of the infidelity, which you have recorded evidence of, Mark is no longer a dependent. So the insurance rejects the claim? I asked. They won't just reject it, Henderson laughed darkly. They will void it. If he signed that affidavit stating he was in an exclusive relationship to get benefits, and he broke that contract while receiving the benefits, it's fraud. The insurance company will not pay a dime. The hospital will then bill the patient directly. How much? For a kidney transplant plus a week in the hospital, uninsured rate, you're looking at $250,000 to $300,000, maybe more. I hung up the phone. I felt lighter than I had in years. The ride home was quiet. Mark sat in the passenger seat, texting. I knew exactly who he was texting. He didn't even look at me. When we got to the apartment, he went straight to the bedroom and lay down. Babe, he yelled from the room. Can you unpack my bag and make me some soup? I'm exhausted. I stood in the hallway, looking at the man who was currently filtering his blood through my sacrifice. Sure, Mark, I called back. I'll take care of everything. And I meant it. I spent the next 2 weeks waiting. I waited for the hospital billing cycle to close. I waited for him to get comfortable. I waited for him to think he had gotten away with the perfect crime. He was arrogant. He invited friends over to show off his recovery. He told everyone how brave he was. He treated me like a live-in nurse, snapping at me if his water wasn't cold enough, all while I was still changing the dressing on my own incision. But yesterday, the mail arrived. It was a letter from the insurance company addressed to me. Explanation of benefits. Pending. It was time. I walked into the living room. Mark was on the couch watching football. He looked healthy. He looked happy. Mark, I said, we're having a dinner party on Friday. He frowned. What? Why? I'm still recovering. It's a thank you dinner. I smiled. A genuine, terrifying smile. I invited your parents. And my parents. I think we need to celebrate your new lease on life, and I have a special surprise announcement. He shrugged, returning his eyes to the TV. Fine, whatever. Just don't expect me to help clean up. Oh, don't worry, I whispered to myself as I walked away. You're going to clean up. You're going to be cleaning up this mess for the rest of your life. The atmosphere at the dinner party was strange, to say the least. My parents were there, looking stiff and protective. They had noticed how thin and pale I still looked compared to Mark, who was practically glowing with health. Mark's parents, on the other hand, were oblivious. They were gushing over him, calling it a miracle, and treating me like I was just the vessel that had delivered their son's salvation. We are just so grateful, Mark's mom said, squeezing my hand a little too hard. You gave him such a gift. It was a transaction, I said quietly. What was that, dear? She asked. Nothing, I smiled. Let's eat. I had ordered catering because I refused to cook for this man ever again. Mark sat at the head of the table, basking in the attention. He was telling a story about the surgery, exaggerating his pain and bravery. He didn't mention me once. Midway through the main course, Mark's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and smirked. I knew it was Jessica. I had seen her name pop up on his screen earlier that day. I stood up and tapped my glass with a spoon. The room went silent. I'd like to make a toast, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Mark looked up, looking bored. Babe, can we just eat? I'm starving. The steroids make me hungry. This won't take long, I said, locking eyes with him. I wanted to talk about the cost of life. We all know I gave Mark a kidney. It was a physical cost, but there are financial costs too. I reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Mark, you've been on my health insurance for 3 years as my domestic partner. It's a great policy. It saved you about $300,000 last week. Mark's dad chuckled. Thank God for corporate benefits, right? Right, I said, but there's a catch. To be a domestic partner, you have to sign an affidavit of exclusivity. It's a legal contract stating we are in a committed, monogamous relationship. If that contract is broken, the coverage is void. Mark stopped chewing. He put his fork down. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Nurse Jessica, I said. The silence in the room was sudden and absolute. It was like all the oxygen had been sucked out. Mark's face went from confused to pale in a split second.
I'm talking about the fact that while I was 3 doors down, vomiting from pain medication, you were sleeping with your night nurse in your hospital bed, I continued, my voice rising just slightly. I'm talking about the recording I have of you telling her that you only stayed with me for the kidney, that you planned to leave me as soon as you were healthy. That's a lie, Mark shouted, standing up. She's crazy. The surgery messed with her head. I didn't flinch. I opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a letter from my company's HR department. As of this morning, our domestic partnership has been terminated due to fraudulent misrepresentation. I submitted the evidence, the audio recordings, the timestamps, the photos of her car at our apartment while I was at the pharmacy, yesterday. I slid the paper across the table to him. And this, I pulled out a second document, is a notification from the insurance carrier. Because the fraud occurred before the final billing cycle of the surgery, specifically the infidelity started during your hospital stay, they have retroactively denied the claim. Mark picked up the paper, his hand shaking. Denied? He whispered. You are uninsured, Mark, I said cold. The hospital will be billing you directly. I spoke to the billing department today. The total for the surgery, the hospital stay, the anesthesia, and the post-op care comes to roughly $285,000. And since you aren't covered anymore, you'll have to pay full price for your anti-rejection meds. That's about $2,000 a month. Mark's mother let out a sob. His father looked like he was going to have a heart attack. You can't do this, Mark screamed, his face turning purple. You gave me the kidney. You can't take back the insurance. That's murder. I didn't take it back, I said calmly. You voided the contract. You bought a luxury item, life, with a credit card that just got declined. I'll sue you. He lunged toward me, but my father stood up and blocked him. My dad is 60, but he's a retired union pipe fitter. He didn't move an inch. Sit down, son, my dad growled. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out the final piece of paper. This is a copy of the complaint I filed with the State Nursing Board and the Hospital Ethics Committee regarding Jessica. I included the audio of her admitting to diverting narcotics, giving you off-the-books oxycodone, and engaging in sexual relations with a patient under her care. She's going to lose her license. She's probably going to be fired by tomorrow morning, so I don't think she'll be able to help you with those medical bills. Mark looked at the papers, then at his parents, then at me. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. He looked small. Why? He croaked. Why wait until now? Why let me think everything was fine? Because I wanted you to feel safe, I said. I wanted you to feel exactly how I felt before I walked into that hospital room. Safe, loved, and secure. And then I wanted to rip it all away, just like you did to me. I pointed to the door. Get out. You have 30 minutes to pack a bag. The locks are being changed tomorrow. And Mark, if you try to take the TV, I'll call the cops and show them the texts where you admitted to selling my jewelry to buy Jessica gifts. Mark's parents tried to argue, pleading with me to be reasonable, but my mother ushered them out. Mark scrambled to his room, throwing clothes into a duffel bag like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. He left 20 minutes later. He didn't look back. I sat down at the table, alone with my parents. My scar throbbed, a dull ache in my side. I was down 1 kidney. I was down 1 boyfriend. But for the first time since the surgery, I took a deep breath, and it didn't hurt.
It has been 6 months since the dinner party, and I know you guys are dying to know what happened to Mark, Nurse Jessica, and my bank account. Let's start with the easy part. Jessica. The nursing board does not mess around. When I submitted the audio of her admitting to diverting narcotics, giving Mark off-the-books oxy, and engaging in a sexual relationship with a patient, the investigation was swift. She was fired from the hospital within 48 hours. Last I heard, her license was suspended pending a final hearing, but given the evidence, she's likely done in the state. Turns out, I wasn't the first wife or girlfriend she had displaced. There was a pattern, but I was the first one who brought receipts. She tried to contact me once on Facebook, sending a long, rambling message calling me a vindictive witch. I didn't reply. I just forwarded a screenshot to the investigator. Now for Mark. The fallout was catastrophic. Because the insurance claim was denied retroactively due to fraud, the hospital went after him with the ferocity of a starving wolf. The final bill wasn't $285,000. After they added in the complications and the uninsured rate adjustments, it was closer to $320,000. Mark tried to sue me. He actually found a lawyer desperate enough to take the case. They claimed promissory estoppel, basically arguing that I had promised him the kidney and the care, and that revoking the insurance was a breach of a verbal contract. The court date was a joke. I walked in with my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, and a binder 3 inches thick. Mark walked in looking like a wreck. He had lost weight, his skin was sallow again, not because the kidney was failing, but because he couldn't afford the top-tier anti-rejection meds. He was rationing them. The judge listened to his lawyer rant for about 10 minutes about how cruel I was. Then, my lawyer simply stood up and read the domestic partner affidavit that Mark had signed 3 years ago. Your Honor, Henderson said, the plaintiff signed a document stating that any violation of exclusivity would void the policy. He violated it. The defendant didn't cancel his insurance. His own actions triggered a pre-existing clause. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice. He even ordered Mark to pay my legal fees. As we were leaving the courtroom, Mark tried to approach me. He looked pathetic. He was wearing a suit that was too big for him now. I miss you, he said. He didn't even have the dignity to whisper it. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. I'm drowning, babe. I can't afford the meds. I'm going to lose the kidney. I stopped. Part of me, the old part, the part that loved him enough to get cut open, felt a twinge of pity. But then I remembered the giggle. I remembered him telling Jessica he only stayed for the organ. You're not going to lose the kidney, Mark, I said. Medicare covers anti-rejection meds for transplant patients, even if you're broke. You'll just have to go to the state clinic. You'll have to wait in line. You won't get the VIP treatment anymore. But I'm bankrupt, he cried. The hospital is garnishing my wages. I'm living in my parents' basement. That sounds like a you problem, I said. You wanted a new life, Mark. You got one. You just didn't read the fine print. I walked away. I didn't look back. I'm doing okay. Physically, I'm back to 100%. I'm hiking again. I'm back at work. The scar on my stomach has faded to a silvery line. For a long time, I hated that scar. I looked at it in the mirror and saw a symbol of my stupidity. I saw a thief's mark. But recently, my perspective has shifted. That scar isn't a symbol of what I lost. It's a symbol of what I'm capable of. I am a woman who loved so fiercely she gave a part of her own body to save someone. That is a beautiful thing. The fact that the recipient was unworthy doesn't diminish the gift. It just makes him a tragedy. I'm dating again. A nice guy. He's a teacher. On our 3rd date, I told him the story. I showed him the scar. He didn't look at it with pity. He traced it with his thumb and said, "He must have been an idiot to lose a woman like you." Yeah, he was. So, to anyone reading this, be careful who you give your heart to, and be even more careful who you give your kidneys to. But most importantly, always, always read the terms and conditions.